Do you remember how subtly creepy Rosemary's Baby was? Well, that's how batshit insane the sequels are. I'm Alma Langlois, and today I'm talking about the 1976 made-for-TV movie Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby and Ira Levin's 1997 Son of Rosemary. Both are about the battle of good and evil within all of us, but in a totally nonsensical way. Warning, there will be spoilers because I'm still trying to duct tape my sanity back together. First, look what's happened to Rosemary's Baby. But more importantly, look what's happened to Rosemary. She became Patty Duke!
I want to know what happened.
According to her memoir, Patty Duke was one of the contenders for Rosemary in the original. I can picture her doing a great freakout during the Hail Satan scene.
You can go to hell.
Anyway, Patty said she really enjoyed working with Ruth Gordon, but she did this one purely for the paycheck. But that's okay, because if there's one thing I love, it's a made-for-TV movie starring Patty Duke.
Sparkle, Neely, sparkle.
Unfortunately, you're not going to see much of Rosemary, because after the first quarter of the movie, she tries to escape the clutches of the coven with her devil baby, and ends up on a possessed bus to nowhere.
What the hell happened to Rosemary?
So what happened to Rosemary's Baby? He starts off as a Damien-like demonic toddler who's raised by a satanic sex worker, Tina Louise. Because who better to cast as a satanic sex worker than Tina Louise? Then he grows up to be the worst thing imaginable. An aimless musician who's prone to having proto-goth musical freakouts and then gets into a long, drawn-out psychedelic battle with the demonic bird woman that's supposed to symbolize the war between good and evil, but really just looks silly. The movie seems to have more artistic, surreal aspirations, kind of like if you hired Joe Dorowski to direct an episode of The Love Boat.
This movie's so bogus. It really is.
You see, Adrian is half devil and half human, so he may not necessarily live up to his Antichrist potential. But I already said musician, so that was all you need to know about living up to any potential. It doesn't make any sense. But that's okay, it's the 70s. The world doesn't make any sense. Then he gets roofied and ravished by Donna Mills so she can get pregnant with his devil baby. What were they thinking? What were they on? And how do I get a prescription for this stuff? It makes you see the whole world in absurdo-vision. Does anyone know the story behind how this came into existence? Nobody's talking. I've gotta add, this movie also loses points for featuring Broderick Crawford, but not having him be one of the sameness. Big Broad, one of Philly's favorite sons. He was most well known for his starring role as Chief Dan Matthews on Highway Patrol, the show where not much really happens, but I can't stop watching it. My favorite is when they're going to go up in the whirlybird, but Broderick's too fat to buckle his seatbelt, so he just throws it across his lap. And of course, Minnie and Roman Castevet return to try to make sure Adrian lives up to being the little devil they want him to be, with Ruth Gordon reprising her Oscar-winning role. The great Sidney Blackmer had shuffled off this mortal coil, so instead we get Ray Milland as Roman. Those two are easily my favorite part of the movie. I could have watched a whole 90 minutes of them just doing their satanic Bickerson shtick.
Will you lay off all this killing talk? We only got a couple more days out here, and you said we were going to meet Charlton Heston.
You think if you want a proper sequel to Rosemary's Baby, you go straight to the author, right? Well, you'd be wrong.
That'll teach you to touch things.
Written in 1997, Son of Rosemary is Ira Levin's final novel. The two sequels are unrelated, but some plot details of Son of Rosemary may have been influenced by Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby. And nobody needs that. It also plays like Levin went into a Prozac and box wine coma watching the final conflict on late-night cable. Set in 1999, Rosemary wakes up in the hospital to discover that she's been in a coma since 1973, when she tried to escape the Coven's clutches with little Antichrist Andy. The plot sickens when Rosemary finds out that Andy, now 33, is the much-beloved leader of a global nonprofit who looks a lot like Jesus and has brought about world peace. Mother and son meet, and Andy reveals that his leadership of the nonprofit was supposed to bring about Armageddon, but his sinister side was defeated by his human side, his mother's side. But Andy's always at constant war with the devil within and may have diabolical intentions with his big hippy-dippy We Are the World style global candlelighting ceremony. But honestly, how can something like that not be evil?
Writing a book, hippie? Why don't you go listen to some folk music and give me a break?
And on top of all that, he keeps trying to have sex with Rosemary. Ira Levin was inspired by the doomsday scenario circulating about Y2K, a year which would coincide with Rosemary's baby turning 33 years old, the same age that Christ was crucified. Reviews from critics and readers were not kind.
Hated it.
Peter Straub wrote that he thought they misunderstood that the book is a satire, which there may be something to that, since most of Levin's books are dark comedies of manners. Initially, I read this as a goof on Levin's part, sort of like the sequel that Robert Bloch wrote to Psycho, where the author's pressured to write a sequel to one of their massive hits that they don't really want to write. And there's some clues within that this book is meant to be taken in jest. But I also think that Levin may be commenting on the replacement of religion in our culture with shallow New Age mysticism and a continued romanticization of the hippie movement that gave birth to that.
They're all screwed up, so they're screwing up the culture.
He also shows a healthy dose of skepticism about the nonprofit industry, which often presents a noble public image while masking more nefarious intentions. I think the problem is that, especially after waiting 30 years, no one wanted to read a sequel where Rosemary's baby tries to give Rosemary the length of his devil horns.
It's not little, you just scared it, that's all. Just wait.
Well, I think it's time to put this baby to bed. Join me next week for the occult Italian style with 1972's All the Colors of the Dark. So until next time, kids, stay sick.